writing about it, I just realized, there's so much in history, in philosophy, in culture, and in everyone's experience, because everyone can go to this, what I call the secret world, and that's the place you go to when you're alone. So everyone has got a different experience of solitude. It's completely unique to you. No one can share it. But at the same time, there are things that we all experience the same in solitude. So it's kind of shared as well in a different way. And it's a place where you can go to recharge after you've been in company. I think that's one of the main definitions of an introvert, someone who draws energy from being alone rather than from being in company. And for extroverts, it's vice versa. So that's kind of where it starts. It starts as somewhere to go and regain your energy, but it could be much more than that as well.
Hello, and welcome to episode 147 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we will air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast and help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Tom Albrighton is a freelance writer and editor based in the UK. Tom is the author of 4 books, and as a lifelong introvert and a longtime freelancer, he's interested in how introverts can thrive when working on their own and how they can build on their unique strengths to succeed. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Tom. So great to have you.
Hi, it's great to be here.
All right. We're going to get into a couple of books that you've written. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as an introvert to now your writing career and also writing for introverts.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a freelance writer. I do commercial writing and editing for clients all around the world. I've been doing that for nearly 20 years now. And before that, I worked in publishing and design studios. So I did the 9 to 5 in an office with other people. Then I got made redundant from my job and I started freelancing. And I quickly realized that that was the perfect lifestyle for me as an introvert, working on my own, working at home. That suited me really well. And I kind of wondered why I hadn't done it earlier, really. Then as a freelancer, I co-founded and ran an association of commercial writers here in the UK, which is now called Pro Copywriters. That's still going. I'm no longer involved in it, but it's still going, strength to strength. And as an introvert, running an organization like that was quite a big ask. I had to do some public speaking, which is something that I find quite hard. And after a while, I just thought, this is getting too much for me now. So I stepped away from that. And then I still wanted a side hustle on top of my freelancing. So I thought, well, how about I write a book? And I wrote my first book, which was called Copywriting Made Simple. That's all about my work as a commercial writer. So I was writing about the craft of writing, what I did at my desk. And then I thought, well, maybe I could write something that is a bit more from the heart, a bit more about me as a person. And I thought, well, a lot of freelancing books are quite sort of go-getting, very sort of on the confidence side and putting yourself out there. And I just thought, well, what about something for freelancers who are introverted? So I wrote a book called The Freelance Introvert. And that allowed me to talk about my work and also talk about, my personality a bit and what other people might be feeling. Kind of an antidote to the sort of LinkedIn vibe, where it's all like, hey, yeah, we're having success. We're doing great. Here's all my achievements. Just something for the people who are a little bit more quiet and reserved. And then my most recent book, which I think we're talking about today, is One for Joy. And that's a book all about solitude. So it's just a collection of ideas, thoughts, stories, historical stuff, all about being on your own. it's not a self-help book. It's not a psychology book. It's not a psychiatry book. I'm not an expert in personality or psychology or anything like that. It's really just a toilet book for introverts, just something for people to enjoy. If you like being on your own, then I think you'll like the book. And there's a lot of really good books about solitude that you should check out. But I sometimes find they're a little bit are quite earnest, sort of quite serious about the topic. And I just wanted to do something a little bit more lighthearted, just to say that solitude can be fun. It's got its lighter side as well, and that's really where the book came from.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. We are definitely going to get into both books there. But first, how did you figure out you were an introvert, and how did you learn to embrace that?
Well, I don't know when I put the label introvert on it. I think that's really a watershed for a lot of people, isn't it? When they actually realize that introversion is a thing and they hear that label. I'm not sure when I first heard that. It was maybe when I read Quiet. I think that's a huge moment for a lot of people recently. But as soon as I heard the distinction, I knew it applied to me. As a child, I was always big on solo pastimes, so reading, playing with Lego or Legos, as you call it in the States, making music, that sort of thing. So yeah, and then when I did hear the word introversion and I understood what it meant, it was really great to have a label or a diagnosis, you could even say, for all those habits and traits that I'd always had, so I could stop thinking of them as faults and just start thinking of them as features.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great book, Susan Cain's Quiet. I think it's
Yeah,
going on 10 years. I think it's 2013,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's helped so many people. And I've had so many guests on that have said the same thing, that that was a book that really brought awareness. And it's things like when you write in your book about, maybe when you were a child needing that space. And I could definitely relate to a lot of that, having some good friends, but just a small circle of friends. But I remember most of my school life, I actually lived pretty far away from the school. I could take the bus, but I walked just because I really enjoyed it. That long
yeah,
walk, and I didn't really realize what was going on, or just having great playing with, having a great imagination, and doing
yeah,
things like that.
yeah, definitely.
So, what would you say is a strength or two of yours being an introvert?
I'm pretty good at listening, listening to people, really thinking through what they're saying. I'm pretty good at thinking things through before I act. So, think really carefully about things before I do them. And then when I commit to them, I'm pretty good at following through. And I like to follow through on my own, which is a real introvert thing. So, um, sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm going to write a book about this," or I'm writing a book about something, and then you don't hear anything else for several years and maybe never. But I had my first book. I had it pretty much completely written. I had a complete first draft before I told anybody else, literally in the world, that I was working on it. Not even my family. And that was really important to kind of just keep it close so that I could. I guess it's a control thing, isn't it? I mean, it's maybe not even positive, but it's really about keeping control over the work and just shaping it into exactly what you want it to be. And I think that's an introvert trait, is like, I know what this thing needs to be, whatever it is you're creating. It could be a book or anything, but it's like, this is my vision and I really need to follow through on this, until a point where I feel happy showing other people. And I don't know why that is. It's like, I don't know if we're afraid that other people are going to divert it or reshape it somehow, but I think that's a real introvert thing.
Yeah, I very much relate to that. Keeping stuff close until we're ready to launch. I've definitely done that, and so we can work on it in our way. I think, because we definitely have some great ideas and things we want to do, but pretty sure about ourselves and how we want to do that.
Sure, yeah.
So we're definitely going to get into solitude today and the
Mhm.
need for solitude. Are there any other needs that you've discovered as an introvert that you need?
I think recently I've really realized that I like to be in company and I need to be in company, but I kind of need to be off to one side of the. So I mean, one-on-one is like that. That's a certain way of being, when you're actually communicating with somebody all the time. But then once the group gets bigger than that, I really like just hearing people talk, being in on the conversation. I'm not zoning out, right? I'm not drifting away, but I just like to be part of the conversation without playing an active role. And I used to worry about that, and I used to think like, oh, I should say something. I should express my thoughts or impose myself, or I should take part in this conversation. And the older I've got, I've just come round to the fact that I enjoy just being there, and I try and just savor that now. And the other thing is, I really like to be in nature. So that could be my own garden, or it could be out and about, walking or cycling in the countryside. And for me, a quiet, natural environment is an introvert environment, and a loud urban environment is an extrovert one. And I kind of equate those things, and I don't think that's not necessarily true. I think you can be introvert or extrovert in either one, but that's the association that I've made. And I think being in nature is just about this need to have less going on. So less going on in the outer world, less going on in your mind at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And we definitely thrive in the more one-on-one or small group environments. And
Mhm.
we just got to figure out what we want, like you said, and what you
Yeah,
want is absolutely fine, even if your extrovert friend wants something different.
yeah.
Figure out how to thrive and do what you want to do, whether
Hmm.
it be in large or small group, and be good with it.
Yeah, sure.
And then, so on this show, we definitely talk about the strengths of introverts, the needs of introverts, and we do a little myth busting. Is there a myth or two about introversion you want to bust today?
Yeah, well, I've listened back to some episodes, and I think you've you've pretty much blasted them all. But I'll give you my favorites. I think the main thing is that introversion isn't a weakness. I mean, the title of the podcast says it all, really. Introversion can be a strength. It can be a strength in the workplace. It can be a strength in relationships. It can be a strength in family. It can be a positive thing. Um, and then building on that, I would say that introversion is not a lack of confidence. So, just because, well, maybe you feel a certain way in some social situations, but that's just your personality. That's just some traits of your character. It doesn't mean that you don't have strong beliefs, that you're not confident in your abilities. It just means that you don't want to talk about them particularly loudly. Um, and the other thing I would say is that um, introversion is not arrogance, which is the thing. There's a conclusion that some people come to is that introverts are kind of trying to put themselves on a pedestal, or they look down on other people. It's really not the case. It's just about us saying what we want, making certain choices in certain situations, and we don't despise extroverts. We don't think we're so great. It's just the way we are.
Yeah, yeah. It's a strength. If someone's not confident, they can gain confidence, absolutely. But I've had that too, where just because I think it's because we live in our heads, and
Mhm.
people don't see everything that's going on. And
Yeah,
sometimes we can come off as arrogant. And I've been accused of that before, and it's like, no, that's nothing's further from the truth. Just people can't see what's going on inside our head, and we can be misread for sure.
yeah. It's a similar thing with shyness, where if you're feeling, like you say, you're feeling in your head, you're worried about what to say, um, and it can come across like you're being aloof from a social situation.
Yeah.
You're not making any effort, and people infer from that you don't care. You're not bothered about the occasion, you're not bothered about the people, you think you're above it. But in fact, it's the exact opposite. If you didn't care, then you wouldn't care, but you do care. You care a lot. You're really trying to get into this situation. You're trying to think of the right thing to say, or you're trying to think of anything to say, and that comes across the wrong way. But you're very much concerned, very engaged in the occasion. You just don't quite know how to get involved.
Yeah. So sometimes it could be someone doesn't know how to get involved. But the other thing is we're not saying as many words. It's just
Yeah,
never we're like, I talk about how you can be a strong introvert, but you're never going to be the chatterbox. You're never going to, because we think and then we speak and we think and share what we think is most important. And again, we're never bashing extroverts, but their process is different. So they're going to share most everything. And so they might appear to be more engaged because they're sharing everything, but we're processing things and putting a succinct response together. And that can be misunderstood often.
yeah, yeah. I think extroverts think by speaking, don't they?
Yeah, that's
They
how
speak to think.
yeah, most of the time. And again, that's where a lot of misunderstanding comes from is that, we think first and then speak because we're putting all of our ideas together and sharing a main point where they're kind of talking out loud. And again, it's just we're wired that we're each wired that way. Who knows why? And it's just something we need to understand.
Yeah, and sometimes, sometimes it takes too long. Well, for me anyway, it just takes too long to think of what I'm going to say, and the conversation's moved on. And I just have to think, well, yeah, I had that thought, but now that's gone. So we're talking
Yeah,
about something else now.
yeah, that happens. And we definitely talk a lot about how we can mitigate some of that by preparing. You can never fully prepare for everything, but you can definitely prepare and think about ahead of time what you want to say to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Tom, you've written 4 different books: Copywriting Made Simple, How to
Hmm.
Write Clearly,
Hmm.
The Freelance Introvert. I'm going to go ahead and read the whole title: Work the Way You Want Without Changing Who You Are. I love that. And One for Joy, your latest book, An Introvert's Guide to the Secret World of Solitude. You're a writer, but a couple of these books you're focusing on introverts. How did you decide to do that?
Um, well, like I was saying earlier, I really just I wanted to put something of myself into my writing. Because I'd made a big effort to make copywriting made simple, sort of authoritative and universal, something that everybody could get into. Um, and well, I don't know if I achieved that or not, but that was my aim anyway. Um, but I felt that it was really for other people. It was really to help other people. It's to help newcomers to copywriting get into it, and that's great. If it helps them, that's great. But I just wanted to put a bit more of myself into my writing. And I just thought about my lifestyle as a freelance writer, working on my own, working at home. I think I was reading quiet at that time, and I just thought, well, let's just put these things together. Um, and and that led me to the freelance introvert. I just thought, well, um, there must be something here around why freelancing is a good choice for introverts, but also some things around what they might find a bit difficult. So things like in-person networking can be very daunting for an introvert. The hazards of working at home as well. I mean, working at home is wonderful, but I think you can end up being too insular sometimes. It can be a little bit of a trap for introverts. I think that the home thing, um, and you can end up brooding on things, especially if things go wrong, or maybe a client just says something to you and they express it a certain way. Um, you don't have an outlet for that, and even introverts need a sounding board sometimes. We need a confidant sometimes. So if you don't have that, you can go into a bit of a spiral. So it's the plus side of freelancing for introverts, why it's good, why your strengths will help you, but it's also talking about a few of the downsides.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a big part of this show is looking at how we can be success various areas such as freelancing or whatever it is, networking or public speaking. Because our approach to success, we can be very successful, but our approach might look different. And
Mhm.
you were definitely working from home long before the pandemic, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I wasn't. So the
Oh
pandemic
right, okay.
was my first introduction to fully working from home. And there was a lot of myths out there. Oh, introverts are just loving this. And I'm like, well, not completely. There was definitely maybe a lot of home environments that weren't set up for work, or some isolation like you're talking about that, people, had to cope with. But, there definitely is a good side to it too. And so your book gets into all of that.
Yeah, yeah. The big thing about the pandemic was, I mean, it was distressing in itself, right? So,
Yes.
it might have been, it put you in a home working situation, and maybe you found that you liked that. But, I'd already been working from home for a long time, but I ended up quite short of work because of the economic impact of the pandemic. Plus, there's a there's a really dangerous disease on the loose, and it was a really, really stressful time. So, I certainly wasn't going on social media saying, "Hey, it's the season of the introvert," because I think it was really tough on introverts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. And so it wasn't a necessarily a great way to judge how much you liked working from home with all that was
Yeah.
going on. So I do a hybrid approach now where I go into the office a couple days and work from home, and I think it's a pretty good approach for me. But everybody's going to be different, so we can definitely
Hmm.
check out more about that in your book. In your latest book, One for Joy, you talk about the secret world of solitude. Let's talk about solitude. And we definitely
Hmm.
talk a lot about solitude on this podcast, but I've really been enjoying your book and where you
Thank
go
you.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, like all my books, it wasn't really. It didn't start out as a major inspiration. I didn't have a mission to write a book about solitude, but it was just something that I kept thinking about. I kept coming back to it. I just started writing a few things down, and I thought, maybe this could be a book. And then I realized, how much there is there as soon as I started thinking about it and writing about it. I just realized, there's so much in history, in philosophy, in culture, and in everyone's experience, because everyone can go to this, what I call the secret world. And that's the place you go to when you're alone. So everyone has got a different experience of solitude. It's completely unique to you. No one can share it. But at the same time, there are things that we all experience the same in solitude. So it's kind of shared as well in a different way. Um, and it's a place where you can go to recharge after you've been in company. I think that's one of the main definitions of an introvert, someone who draws energy from being alone rather than from being in company. And for extroverts, it's vice versa. So that's kind of where it starts. It starts as somewhere to go and regain your energy, but it could be much more than that as well. It can be a place where you remember who you are. You get back in touch with your own inner character. Can be a way to speak with yourself, which could be literally, talking out loud to yourself or just communing with yourself, um, asking yourself questions, reflecting on what's been going on in your life, um, thinking about what happened recently or maybe a long time ago, thinking about what's going to happen soon or what might happen a long time in the future. So it's got all these different sides to it. Um, and it's different from loneliness as well. This is something that I think this is where it maybe gets some of its negative connotations as people associate solitude with loneliness, but they are different by nature, because loneliness is an unpleasant emotion that comes from being alone when you don't want to. So an excess of solitude or unwanted solitude. But solitude is a chosen state of being alone. And since you choose it, that implies that it gives you something pleasurable or valuable. So loneliness is an emotion and solitude is a state.
Yeah, that's an important distinction because, another myth is that we hate people. We're humans. We absolutely need people. We have people we love, we care about. But sometimes we want and need to be alone. And I think we both say it's not just a want for us introverts, it's a need. Solitude is definitely something that we need, but we don't need it all of the time, and we do need company. And so, loneliness, introverts can definitely be lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really just a matter of degree or, the amount of solitude that you want. Um, I think when I was writing the book, I was writing a bit about saying that I need to be on my own a lot. And as soon as I wrote that and I saw it on the page, I thought, well, who says it's a lot? That is someone else's judgment. I need to spend a certain amount of time alone. Other people might judge it to be a lot. Someone else might judge it to be not enough. Maybe I should spend more time on my own. So there's all these judgments, and it's quite easy to internalize those judgments. I think, whether other people are making them or not, just because they're there in the culture, it's easy to take them on board and kind of judge your own solitude. And there's really no need to.
Yeah. So I had a cool experience preparing for this. Um, as we're talking about, you definitely we need solitude to recharge, whatever it is that
Mhm.
drains us. And I always say, I'm not drained by everybody, just some people in some situations.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But we need solitude is for a lot of other things that you talk about. We need time to think, to plan, to be strategic, to do our work. Sometimes we need it, and sometimes we just enjoy it, like you write about. I'm home on a Saturday and I'm preparing because I definitely that's one of my needs and also strengths as an introvert. So I'm preparing for this talk with you, and I'm reading your book. And my wife, my two kids, one of my kids is off at the university, but the two that are home, all three
Mhm.
of them are at work, which isn't usual. You know,
Yeah.
I don't. I think since the pandemic, it's been rare to have the house to myself.
Mm.
So all three are gone. I have the house to myself. I'm in my favorite spot in my recliner in my room, reading about solitude, thinking about, hey, what do I want to talk to Tom about? And it was just a really great experience. Like, yeah, it was here I am in solitude. I love this. I need to do this because I need to think about ahead of time what I would like to say. I'm enjoying doing the research. And it was really kind of cool to have that experience in solitude while I'm preparing for this chat with you about solitude.
Yeah, sure. I like to think about people reading the book on their own, and I kind of address the reader at a couple of points in the book and sort of talk about their experience of solitude they might be having right at that very moment.
It was something I needed to do because, again, I do prepare for the podcast with guests, but also it was really enjoyable, just doing the research and thinking about it and thinking about what I want to do. So it was just all of those things that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's great when solitude is given to you like that. And there was a question I know you wanted to talk about, um, articulating the need for solitude or asking for solitude. I mean, that is a really, really difficult thing because of all the judgments that can go on around solitude. I mean, it's easy to say that you want company or you need company. Like, I'm feeling a bit lonely right now. I'd love to have a chat. That's an easy thing to say. It's a really hard thing to say that you want solitude because that feels like a rejection of somebody or everybody or whatever it is. And I don't know how other introverts find this, um, but the danger for me is that I just withdraw, or I kind of go a bit sulky or irritable. I find myself just not relating to other people very well, just because I can't. There isn't a way in that situation, or it's something I'm not able to do. Is just say that I need to be alone at the moment. Um, and I don't really know why we find that hard because nobody who loves you is going to withhold something that you really need. If you say, I really need to be alone, this is something that I need now, I think people will say it's okay, but it's still just a really difficult thing to come out and say.
Why do you think it's looked down on to have solitude? And it definitely is.
I think it's because it's seen as a negative generally. It's generally seen as an absence or a lack, a gap between what life is really about. So, life is what we live with other people. Well, that's what extroverts would say. And being on your own is just waiting for something to happen or downtime. It's just a gap in between other things. Um, so if you actually seek that out, that's kind of um, it's like turning towards darkness, and away from the light. I think that's what people think. They just think, why would you embrace an absence? Why would you embrace this nothingness? But they don't think of it as an experience in itself, which is what it is. It's a chosen experience. It's a way of being. But I think people just think of it as a nothing, and that's why they look down on it. That's my best answer, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely misinterpreted. But as introverts, we have one of our greatest gifts is our ability to think deeply. And with that, we need to and also often want to, be alone to
Mhm.
use that gift and think and get into that inner world of ideas. And often we do have some rich imaginations.
Yeah, absolutely. But that also speaks to the way that thinking is not regarded as an act or an activity, right? You know, if I'm just sitting there, you come into a room and I'm just sitting there in a chair, you might say, "Well, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. Do the dishes. Clean the house or something." But I am doing something. I'm thinking.
Yeah, like my wife might think, "What are you doing there?" And I'm like, "I'm working on my podcast." And I really am. I'm just thinking about it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
might not be actively writing anything down, but I'm engaging in thought.
And that's really important. Whatever you're going to do, the thinking that comes before the doing is just as important as the doing itself.
Yeah,
Because the thinking determines the doing, right? When it comes to take action, it's the thoughts that you've had before that determine the action, the quality and the outcome of the action that you take. So there's kind of a prejudice towards doing, isn't there? Like, something must be done. I've got to do something about this, but maybe it's more important to think about it first.
yeah, well said. Yeah, absolutely. So, like we're talking about, it's important that we figure out how to communicate with, those we care about or those that we work with, this need. And, it's part of the work here is just really getting the word out there, what introversion really is and what it isn't, and busting some myths. And,
Mm,
just letting people know, I care about you, and this is a need that I have, I'm gonna be better for it. I'm gonna be better for me and for you for taking this time.
yeah, I think that's a really important point that I talk about in the book. Actually, is about being your best self for as long as you can. And for an introvert to be their best self in company, like you might not be able to do it for very long. It's something you have to accept. Like maybe I can only hold a conversation for an hour. I can only go to the bar for a couple of hours. I can only go to a networking event for half an hour. Whatever it is, you've got your limits, and you have to know your limits, and you have to respect them, and you have to appreciate that the time that you spend alone is kind of charging up your social psychological batteries so that you can be with people better when the time comes. And again, it would be great to just say to the people close to you, I can't be good for you right now because I just need to go and be on my own, even if it's just half an hour or something like that. I mean, the closest I get is sort of expressing a preference for solo activities like going in the garden. So I'll just say, like, I'm going to go in the garden now, which is really me saying I'm going to go and be on my own now because no one's going to help me in the garden in my
Right.
house anyway. So that means I'm going to be working on my own. So I've kind of got these proxies for solitude. If I say I'm going to do this task, that means that I'm going to go and be on my own. And I think probably people understand that.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Back to starting to work from home all the time, I realized that even though I don't like driving in traffic and paying for gas and all that stuff, my drive time was a time of solitude for me. And when I was solely working from home, I found that I did need to find a replacement for that. And I would joke with my wife, even though so I'm working at my home office and I'm done for the day, and I'm gonna walk a few steps to my bedroom to sit in my recliner. I would tell my wife, "Hey, I'm gonna drive home now," and just meaning I need a little space. I love you all, and I'll be downstairs in a minute, but I need a little bit of time. So yeah, I like that. Going to the garden or I'm gonna drive home now, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And it's great that you can say that. And that really points to the importance of liminal experience as well, liminal spaces, the spaces in between, the times in between. Because again, I think a lot of people would say that's just downtime, dead time, wasted time, sitting on the train, sitting in traffic, waiting in an airport, something like that. People would just think this is a waste of time, but it's not a waste of time. That's a solitude opportunity. And if solitude is scarce in your life, you need to really embrace that opportunity. Don't feel irritated by that. Don't feel that's limiting or wasting your time. That's an opportunity to be on your own that you can take. And like you say, when those things are taken away, like when your drive is taken away, you suddenly think, oh, actually, I really needed that time. I didn't enjoy sitting in traffic, but I was getting something from that experience, and now I need to replace it.
Yeah, so it definitely sometimes was recharge time, but a lot of it was I had some of my best ideas on those
Yeah,
drives, and
yeah.
sometimes I joke that my work should pay for my drive because I solved a lot of problems during that time.
Yeah, well, I mean, writing about, I'm working on another book about freelancing, and I talk about how you can charge your clients for thinking, because, like I was just saying before, thinking is just as important as doing, and you're really thinking about stuff all the time. Thinking about everything all the time. Your subconscious is always processing stuff that you're thinking about, and sometimes it comes up with ideas in these liminal times, like you're in the shower or just walking down the street, driving the car. You never know when your mind is going to come up with something like that. And I just talk about how important it is to charge clients for thinking. Whenever you do, you might do that thinking at your desk, or you might do it in the shower. But the point is, you're giving value, and it could be the most important value that you provide.
Yeah, it's a little harder to capture those ideas in the shower.
Well,
But
you
but they
can get a
definitely
shower
come.
pad. You can get this shower-proof pad that hangs in the shower, and that you can write your ideas down.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I should look into that. We talk a lot about solitude, on this show. I
Mhm.
write about it. But your book took me in a different place that I hadn't really thought of. And we know ourselves best. And you talked about being in solitude was really a chance to be yourself. And that struck me because, this podcast, I'd like to think that I am being myself. That's the whole point is, learning to embrace your introversion and being your authentic self around
Mhm.
others.
Mhm.
But when I was reading your writing, it's like, okay, yeah, I am doing that. But no matter how much I try to be my authentic self, no one is ever really fully going to know me better than I do. And that solitude is really an opportunity to, you know, be myself like in no other situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this idea that we all have our social self and we have our inner self. And when you talk about being yourself in company, I guess you're really saying, that you get those two selves as close to each other as you can. You get them as much in harmony as you can. But like you say, there's always going to be that inner self that no one ever sees. And some people don't want to see it. I think that's an interesting point, maybe about extroverts. Not all extroverts, but people do use company as a way to get away from themselves. Sometimes, they don't want to sit down and listen to their own thoughts. But for introverts, it's a chance to get away from um, the way that other people see you. So even if you are being your authentic self, you are still, I think, always thinking about the judgments that other people are having. You're seeing yourself through their eyes, because you have to, just to be in company, right? You're not just completely heedless of what everyone else thinks. It's a two-way interaction. It's a multi-way interaction with other people. So you're thinking about what they're thinking. And it's kind of like a performance. It's like being on stage all the time. You're always thinking about the impression that you're giving, managing that impression, thinking what other people are, what they might want, second guessing their motives, their emotions, because that's what it means to be in company, right? That's how we do it. So if all the world is a stage, then solitude is what you see when the curtain falls. That's your backstage, when nobody's looking at you. You don't have to perform for anyone anymore. You don't have to think about what they're thinking. And it's just a place where you just get away from all those judgments and opinions. Um, which might be real or they might not. They might just be things in your head. They might be your own second guesses, your own perceptions of what people are thinking. But even so, you still have to deal with them. And when you get into solitude, you don't have to deal with them anymore.
Yeah, in your book you call it paying yourself a visit. Why is that so
Yeah.
important?
Yeah, well, there's a quote from Hannah Arendt in the book, and she defines solitude as being together with oneself. So there's this distinction between I have to try and get this right. There's the I, which is like the inner ego, the inner self, and then there's me, which is the one who knows the self. So you have yourself that is yourself, and you have the self that knows you as well. And it's about bringing those two halves together. And you come back to this underlying sense of self that is always there, this continuous line of consciousness stretching all the way back to your birth, and it will stretch all the way forward into the future to the end. And it's always there. This constant thread is always there. But in normal life, you're not really aware of it. You're all, like I say, you're always thinking about other people, what they might think. And this sense of self gets kind of lost and messed up. And it's a chance to just get back in touch with that, talk things over with yourself, find out what you really think. Maybe you just need to think about this for a while to really understand what you think about something. Your first impression maybe was wrong. First impression of a person or a situation, you come back to that, you think it through again, and you start to understand your own thinking, your own opinions.
Again, I really value solitude and giving myself a chance to recharge or to think. But often my mind might go other places and I might
Mhm.
not, I might be trying to be in the moment and not very successful at it. So, how can we practice mindfulness? What have you learned where you could be more in the moment?
Well, the practice of mindfulness meditation is really just about being in the here and now. It's just where you focus all your awareness on what's happening right now. So you can do this in quite a formal way when you can sit in the lotus position and you can visit a meditation center or whatever it is, but you don't have to do that. You can just sit there and just focus your attention on your own breathing, just feel it coming in and out, and just notice what's going on in the inner world and in the outer world. So you notice your own thoughts as they go by, and you notice the sights and sounds around you, but you try not to get caught up in them. So there's no judgment, there's no analysis, there's no thinking. Well, there is thinking. Your thoughts happen. Your mind has thoughts, which is what it always does, but you don't get caught up in those thoughts. You just let your thoughts pass away. Um, and if you just do this for a few minutes, it just gives you this real feeling of being calm and centered, and you can carry that on into the rest of your day. And that's something I think you really, well, probably have to be alone to do that effectively, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Tom, we've talked about a lot of great things. This time is going by really fast.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about solitude, the need for it, or the benefits of it that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the book. So no, I think it's been a really good talk actually.
And thank you. It definitely, it's a need that's not often understood, but it goes far beyond just the need to recharge. That's definitely an important thing for us as introverts. But there's so much more, of just being able to think, being able to be creative, being able to use our gifts. So, Tom, where can people go to find out more about your books and the work that you do?
Well, all my books are available on Amazon. That's the main place to get them. I think you can get them in some bookshops, but it's all on Amazon. They're in ebook and paperback as well, and some are in audio. Um, Kind of drifting away from social media a bit these days. Not so big on Twitter as I used to be, but I do still occasionally tweet, and I am Tom Copy, TomCopy. And I also post on LinkedIn with more of a work flavor on there. So just search me on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'll be happy to connect.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks again, Tom. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts, links to social media, and other items. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.